International Falls, where we're going to pick up our canoes. You can see the brand new Duluth packs all lined up there, ready to go. We didn't get far before we had our first flat tire. What the Vandenbarks had done is gotten 4 new Sears retreads for their car before we headed out. We ended up with 4 fairly new Sears retreads when we finished the trip. Here we are stopped at a Sears Roebuck store, exchanging a tire, one of several stops. Here we are at another Sears store getting another tire exchanged. This is in International Falls where we're doing a final check of some of the equipment that we've got. This is one of the guns that we took with us. This is a 30-06. We also took a 12-gauge shotgun with us. We had to get special explorer permits to be able to carry guns in the Northwest Territories. As normally a white man isn't allowed to hunt there, but for our circumstances we were permitted to carry guns. This is out at Camp Kooch-I-Ching, where we've getting our canoes, which were used canoes, repaired before we started our trip. This is going through customs, and then you can see now how we carried the 2 canoes on top and then the 3rd canoe on the trailer. The 2 canoes on top are 17-foot Grumman canoes, and the one on the trailer is an 18-foot Grumman canoe. This is on our way up through Canada. This is the city of Saskatoon in Saskatchewan. Each day, 2 of us had to take a turn hitchhiking, as they didn't have enough room in the car for all 6 of us. So when Tom Vandenbark and I hitchhiked, we got a ride on a cattle truck that had a couple of wild horses that had been caught, and he carried them to the dog meat factory here. This is Tom Vandenbark on the same day. We're headed now onto Peace River, where we're going to meet the rest of the group for that night. After Peace River, we get on the McKenzie Highway, and then the last 600 miles to the town of Yellowknife is by on gravel road. All right, this is going down into the town of Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, just on the edge of Great Slave Lake. This is the morning that we set out on our trip. This is on the Yellowknife River. We got one of the men that was a foreman for one of the gold mines in town to come out and pick up our car and keep it for us during the summer. This is where we put in to start our trip. All right, this map kind of shows the entire route of our trip. We're going to start here in Yellowknife, go up the Yellowknife River and across the chain of lakes and so forth till we get to Point Lake. From Point Lake, go out this side of Point Lake, and then over to this lake right here, and then across to the Hood River, and down the Hood River, past Wilberforce Falls to Bathurst Inlet on the Arctic Ocean. This is the Yellowknife River. We're going upstream here. We had some very, very beautiful and scenic places along the Yellowknife River. Again, on the Yellowknife River, you can see that we have a canoe there that's we're getting ready to line up through this little rapids right here. Another pretty good spot on the Yellowknife River here. We had the portage around this spot. Here we are lining up around another rapids. This technique involves just letting the canoe drift out into the current a ways, and you walk along the shore, and your force on the canoe brings it right up through the current. All right, this same spot just a little further up. You can see how the thing works there. This is one of our campsites on the Yellowknife River. Of the three ways to get around a rapids, one being the portage, carry your canoe across land, the other being the lining, which we've seen before. The third way is to just get out and walk the canoe through the rapids. This is what we're doing here. This is a portage on the Yellowknife River, and you can see one of the fellows carrying the canoe on the portage. Up when you get to the top of some of these hills, the vegetation becomes very scarce, but it did make for much easier walking than down along through the trees. So a lot of times we would climb to the top of the hill and then portage along the top of the hill. Stop for a break along one of the portages here, going up the Yellowknife. Another one of our campsites. The tent was supplied by the Eureka Tent Company for the advertising from the pictures that we took. This was the only tent that we had. It slept 6 of us fairly comfortably. That's Tom Vandenbark in the water with the bow of the canoe trying to get it up past a certain rock around this rapids. You definitely don't want to be in the water a very long time because you suffer from hypothermia if you're in there more than a couple of minutes. Here we've gotten around the point and are going to be able to make it up this rapids okay now. Kind of a view of the terrain again at the top of the portage, top of one of the hills, looking out over a chain of lakes that really constitute the Yellowknife River, with the streams that you've seen in the previous pictures, kind of forming the link between the lakes. This is a lunch spot. You can see the fire in the foreground with the pots. Doing a little fishing here. Some places the fishing was great. Here I am landing a northern pike, I believe. We were trying to take care of our fishing equipment, so we used some help on some occasions in landing the fish by using a gaff to ensure that we didn't lose our lures. Here we have some fish fillets for lunch. This cow moose is the first moose that we saw on the trip. We came across this, believe it's probably was used as a cache for food items in this area by the Indians. A little further up the Yellowknife, we came across what appears to be at one time maybe a Indian camp. The trees were put together. The Indians would come in here and put the usually caribou skins around the poles and make for their teepees here. There were approximately 6 or 7 of these teepee structures in this one area. And just about maybe 50 feet north of the teepees were 3 graves. This is one of them. There was another one like this, and then one that was much smaller, which was obvious that of a child. You can see that they put the logs across it, and then they had the stakes around the outside, and apparently in an attempt to keep animals from digging it up. This is George, Simmons, and myself lining up rapids. Some more lining up of a rapids here. Trying to get some of our clothes dried over the fire. A beautiful sunset, one of many that we saw on the trip. This was very late or very early in the morning. The sun would go down and it'd only be down for a couple of hours and then come back up just a short distance from where it had gone down. It never got really dark. You always had plenty of light in the tent, even to write in your logs or whatever you needed to do. There are times when the insects, the flies and the mosquitoes, are extremely bothersome, much more so than any place I'd ever experienced in the past. We had mosquito netting, and we had some special clothes. We had long gloves. We had pants that would fasten tightly around our boots to keep the flies from crawling up and attacking your flesh. There was a time when George had the collar open underneath the mosquito netting on that he was wearing, exposing his neck, and just in a few minutes there was blood running down his neck, and we were able to see it. George didn't even feel it, but the flies had started eating his neck. Several times we would bring the canoe on shore, turn it over, and use it for a table. Turned out to be a handy device on occasion. We're going through a chain of lakes from the Yellowknife River up to Point Lake. En route, we passed this exceptionally high hill for this given area. And in the foreground, you see some ice. It was referred to as an erratic glacial washout by our geologist. I think the next picture may be from the top of that hill. You can see the tent right here, and then the ice and the lake that we had come up. Again, this is from the top of that same hill, and that area to the right on our map was marked as open water. So we're checking the map out here to be sure that we're headed in the right direction, and it turns out we are. We had to portage up to through that ice that's up right over Jim Vandenbark's head there, and then up to the right onto the next lake. We're back down in that ice field now, exploring the ice. Some areas were very shallow and we couldn't paddle through, so we'd get out and walk the canoes through. We've stopped here to pick some blueberries. Didn't find a lot of these, but this was a pretty good bunch of blueberries. They're very small, short bushes here. You had to get right down on the ground to pick them. This is Dexter Davison spooning out some blueberries over some cobblers that were made. We had blueberry cobblers on this night. This was a real taste treat, so we made an effort to capture it for history here. This is a loon with some chicks that we came across. Another one of our fantastic sunsets. When the wind was right, we took advantage of it and would lash the three canoes together and put up the tarp, holding it up with our canoe paddles, and sail across the lake. This is a campsite on a portage. You can see the tent on the top of the hill there. There's water just to the right of us and just to the left of us, a very short portage. We're going to be some more pictures here from this campsite in a minute. Well, a couple of us had drifted off to sleep. Some others were still writing in their logs, and we heard a noise down by one of the canoes from our tent. And we had two canoes left at our kitchen site and one canoe down by the water. And if you look closely, we'll point to the black bear that's coming from the canoe that was down by the water up toward our kitchen. Now, this black bear could have done us some major harm by getting into our kitchen, and we had a gun for this occasion, but it was in the canoe that he had been messing with down by the water. So Tom Vandenbark drifted around to the canoe and got the gun out of the canoe. And Tom Vandenbark shot the bear. This is still the same night, and you can see how bright the horizon is there. It never did get very dark. But we have the bear strung up on a tripod, and we're cleaning him at this point. Working on the bear with the mosquito net on his face. The first thing we ate was the liver. This bull moose is the second moose that we saw. He was fortunate that we had a lot of the bear still with us when we came across him. You can see the moose getting out of the water in this picture. You also notice that we've got some wood with us. We're in that area that's getting very sparse with the amount of wood. And we're going to finish cooking the bear at the campsite tonight. So that's why we're carrying the wood with us. You can see Jim Vandenbark putting one of the hindquarters that we had left on the fire here. Another shot of the bear being roasted. Sunset at that campsite. We're eating in the tent tonight because of the bugs outside, and we brought along a bottle of A1 sauce because we had been told that one of the things that we were going to miss the most would be seasonings and flavors of that type. But you can see we've got the bear hindquarter, cutting it up into some nice sized steaks here. The previous shot was the before shot. This is the after shot. Finished off that entire piece of meat as well as the bottle of A1 sauce. This is from the same campsite, and in the distance there is a place called Dog Rib Rock. This was a meeting spot between the Indians and the Eskimos. It was a very large structure that you could see for miles around. This is the view from the top of Dog Rib Rock. Here we've made it to Point Lake. This is our first campsite on Point Lake. Just before getting to Point Lake, we killed a moose and are carrying the moose with us now. This is inside the tent. We've fixing up our little treat for tonight. We're going to have kind of like donuts. This is a flour and yeast mixture that we've set up in round balls and set on our plates inside the tent with the sun shining on it, letting them rise. And then tonight we're going to fry those in the grease inside the tent. This is another campsite on Point Lake that we were windbound here for about 2.5 days. A lot of strong wind, a lot of rain. Had trouble being able to have a good fire or anything like that, but we did have the moose with us, so we had plenty to eat here. What we're cooking on here is a gasoline stove, got World War I vintage, that used gasoline. We took along 1 can of gasoline in this stove, and that's how we were able to cook in the tent. There were many times when having hot cocoa in the evening, heated up in the tent, really helped warm us up and the tent and made for a very good night's sleep. While we were windbound here, we took some pages out of our logbooks and made some playing cards with them, and just to pass the time of day we were playing cards. George Simmons and Nelson Spencer doing a little harmonizing in the tent here. They were actually pretty good. This is our last night at this campsite. We could tell that the weather was changing, and the next morning we're going to be able to leave. As we were leaving Point Lake, had finished off our moose, we came across a couple of caribou and crept up on them and killed a caribou here. While we were dressing the caribou, I went up over the hill to see what I could find, and I found pretty much a fairly large herd here. They did not seem to mind me. They looked at me but didn't run away from me. It seemed like it would be possible to herd these kind of animals. They let me get pretty close to them. Then as we watched, the entire herd walked down to the edge of Point Lake and one by one stepped off into the water and swam across a fairly wide section of the lake. Some of the caribou didn't feel like they could swim all the way across, and this is one that had turned around and came back. After that first encounter with caribou, we saw caribou almost every day for the next week or two. We also got into some more great fishing areas. In some of these areas we were catching some fabulous lake trout. Some more caribou crossing in front of us here. This is a mess of fish that we caught. These are lake trout. This was marked on our map as open water and turned out not to be. Turned out to be our longest portage. This portage was 4 miles long. We were able to make it with one trip across, though. Kind of a typical dinner shot. We have cake in the reflector oven, some tea, and some kind of food there on the left. I can't recognize it right now. These are some wild berries that we came across. We didn't eat these. Some more vegetation. The summers are short, but they're very colorful. Some beautiful flowers here. These are some more of the flowers. And some more of the flowers. You can see the yellow lichens on the rock also. We had some large lakes to cross and some heavy winds. A lot of times it was raining. It seemed like the wind was coming right off the North Pole. It felt very cold. These were not great conditions to be out, but we had to make about 20 miles a day on the average to be sure that we could complete our trip and before the end of the season would freeze up. Here we tried to get our kitchen as protected as we can, so we put it right up against the high rock face here and put a tarp over the top of it. This is that same campsite. We've got a canoe across the back of the tent to try to protect the back of the tent from the blowing rain when it would be raining. This is from that same campsite, and we see the caribou walking out there in front of us. This is a portage that we took, one of the last portages that we had to make before we could get to the Hood River. The portage was over the high hill on the right-hand side. It was a very tough climb, and again, this was extremely cold in this area. We walked back after making camp on the other end of the portage back to this pool and did some fishing, but it was so cold that you weren't able to grasp the reel. You just kind of had to press your hand against the side of the reel to reel the fish in. This is the same portage, and took this picture for the rainbow. This is from the campsite at the end of that portage. Again, a lot of wind here and rain and cold, but a truly beautiful place. This is up, same campsite, now that the sun's come out. Rolling, good-sized hills here. We're up on the barrens, no trees, in the permafrost. When the wind stopped, we broke camp and headed out and paddled all night. We had a 40-mile stretch here that we needed to cross, so we went ahead and crossed it paddling all night into the morning, just to be able to be sure that we could get across and not be hindered by the wind. This is a portage across the barrens. The reason that we're fanned out here is the fellow that didn't carry the canoe would be the one that would start out. The fellow with the canoe would help load him up, usually putting a bag on top of a bag that he'd be carrying. The fellow with the canoe would then carry the pack for that, the two people in the canoe, their personal items, sleeping bags and so forth, and then put the canoe up and follow the fellow that was that bowman for the day. Each one would be trying to figure out the shortest route across the portage, and so it was that the bowman's job to kind of figure out the shortest way, and then the fellow carrying the canoe would follow him. Here's the portage that put us down into the Hood River. From this point on, now we're going to be going downstream, which was a real big plus. There's the fellow with the canoe right there. This is how we slept in the tents. Here we're going down the Hood River. Some places we'd be like going through a lake and it'd be pretty wide. This is another picture of the Hood River. We were out 45 days and traveled about 800 miles on this trip. This is inside the tent, and the fellow on the left is Nelson Spencer, then Tom Vandenbark, myself, George Simmons, Jim Vandenbark. Dexter Davison took this picture. So the trip flag spread out in front of us there, and in the very foreground you can see the little stove that we used. This is a portage around a narrow part of the Hood River, which was way too rough for us to try to shoot. It's Nelson holding up one of the poles on the tarp that we're using to sail with on this particular day. This is one of the eskers that we saw along the side of the Hood River. These were sand and gravel deposits left by the Great Glacier as it receded north. Another shot of an esker. This is another portage around part of the Hood River here. Had some really wonderful days here on the Hood River, just bright, sunny, relatively warm, spectacular scenery. Got into some great lake trout fishing. We'd catch them in just a few feet of water, and when we were catching them here, you would catch them on each cast, and actually you could sometimes watch them fight to see who could get to the lure first. One of the lake trout that we caught, you can see that the bottom part of it is kind of scarred up from apparently from having fights with other lake trout. This is a string of fish. We took a lot of these pictures to give to the folks that provided us with the fishing equipment. What we do with the fish is, first thing we do is see if they had any eggs, and we'd collect those, either fry them up at lunch or carry them to our dinner site and fry them up for dinner. Then we'd fillet the fish, or sometimes we'd steak them, and they were actually good just boiled in water. This is George Simmons in the stern, myself in the bow with the esker in the background. Another kitchen shot with the reflector oven. Sees the socks up on the rock on the left there, trying to dry those out. The fishing equipment was provided to us by Hayden, and these are some fish that if there's 5 fish, there are only 4 of them were actually caught. The 5th one was following one that was had been caught, and the fella reached down with the gaff and snagged the fish that was following with the gaff and landed him, and then we landed the fish that had been caught. This is another wonderful sunset on the Hood River here. This is a picture of Dexter taking a picture of the first muskox that we saw on the trip. This is the largest herd that we saw. I believe there were about 13 here. They allowed me to get fairly close. The rest of the group is down along the river there that you see in the background. But the first thing they did was went into their defensive posture, which is in a circular pattern with the very young ones on the inside and the males on the outside. In this case, there was one dominant male, and he was pretty much the one that was keeping the other ones motivated here. We had stopped along the river, found a patch of willow trees, and gone in to collect some willow branches for our fire for the night. I was carrying a load back to the canoes, and I saw an animal swimming away from our canoes, and I thought to myself, gosh, that thing looks sort of like a dog or something, but not exactly. About that time, he climbed out on a sandbar in the middle of the river, and I saw that it was a bear. So this is the first picture I was able to take here of a barren land grizzly bear. This is the willow bushes that we collected when we'd seen the barren land grizzly bear. We had a big campfire on this particular night, first good firewood we had in a long time. We were getting close to the end of the trip, but we were also running out of food, and we had been getting plenty of lake trout on the Hood River, and then all of a sudden we weren't getting any fish at all. In lieu of that, we started eating a few of these mushrooms, and the only folks that got sick were the ones that ate the mushrooms before they got cooked. This is the falls that we came to on the Hood River, portaged around it and made camp. Nelson and I had our turn to cook dinner that night. Nelson was so taken by the falls that we set up our kitchen right up close to the falls. After we got the cake going, the wind shifted and the spray came right over on our kitchen, and we had to move everything. And that night the cake fell and we had a big cookie. Another sunset, Jim Vandenbark writing in his log up there. And then we came to Wilberforce Falls, which is one of the reasons that we had selected this route. Dexter Davison had found a picture of this falls in an 1824, 1823 journal of Sir John Franklin's first expedition through this area. This is a spectacular place. This is again at the top looking down into the canyon. Get out by the falls here. This was a group shot. I put the camera down on a rock and set the timer on it. Got the falls in the background and the expedition flag that Dexter's wife had prepared for us. Kind of a real highlight of our trip. Another one of our fabulous sunsets here on the Hood River. This is on Bathurst Inlet, and 2 tents with Eskimos. The men were out fishing or something, and there were 2 women here that could only speak 2 words of English that we understood. They asked us if we wanted tea and sugar, and we thought it would be impolite to refuse, so we went ahead and had some tea with these ladies. This is a picture of the inside of the Eskimo tent. These are Arctic char stretched out to dry. They'll be using this fish all winter long. These are some sled dogs that they kept chained out behind their tents. At the mouth of the Hood River, we came to some men that were taking core samples for a geology company. He had a geologist there, and the head man insisted that we use his airplane that was going to be coming in a couple of days to fly out. This saved us crossing Bathurst Inlet in our canoes. And this is a picture out of it was a single engine Otter that we flew out in. This is a picture kind of back over some of the country that we had crossed by canoe. Took us about 4 hours to cross what had taken us 45 days to go by canoe. 4 of us were able to come out on the first flight, and 2 stayed behind for the second flight. When we got back to Yellowknife, the first thing we did was whip up some things that we had missed a lot of, and one of those was a bunch of pies. So we made a number of pies so we could have plenty to eat and not have to worry about rationing ourselves. And when we were leaving Yellowknife, heading back south, it got reasonably dark, and we got a good view of the northern lights, and this was a picture I took of the northern lights as we were headed south.